So, what is the Digital Service Playbook? Well, stick around and we're going to talk about that tonight. But first, good evening, Agile acquisition enthusiasts. Welcome back to the Underground Digital Tiki Bar. It's Friday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Agile Acquisition and Alcohol. Cheers. On tonight's episode, I thought I would take us back to the beginning, where the procurement odyssey started, where the digital service revolution started, and that's with the Digital Service Playbook. So the Digital Service Playbook can sort of trace its history back to the Agile Manifesto, which was written by 12 engineers stuck in a cabin. They were snowed in. Well, the Digital Service Playbook wasn't written by 12 engineers, but was written by a group of engineers at US Digital Service and the 18F back in the early years in the sort of scrappy startup phase of the organizations, where they came together and thought, let's come up with some simple, very easy to understand concepts that will frame all of the work that would come thereafter. Because there's 13 plays, I thought I'd break this up into 2 episodes and walk you through each individual play and give you a little bit of background and context as to what that play means. Because even though the Digital Service Playbook has been around for several years, it's still just as foundational and important to all the work that everybody is doing as it was when it was first created. So let's get started. Play number 1, understand what people need. I know it's a novel concept, but believe it or not, in government contracts, a lot of times users aren't even considered. And when I talk about what's the most important innovation or contribution to government technology, it's the incorporation of user-centered design. User-centered design takes a look at what the user actually needs. Historically, government requirements are written by program managers who oftentimes don't even have access to the users, especially when those users are citizens. And there is often a belief that the Public Records Act prevented government requirements officers from even reaching out to users. We've since proven that that's not true, and Erie Meyer wrote an excellent article on how you can go about doing that, and I'll go ahead and link that below. But just understand that you can, and understanding what people need is absolutely foundational. Whether it's internal users or external users, you have to get out and talk to them and find out what is going to solve their needs most. Number 2, address the whole experience from start to finish. This is important. You have to think about how the user is going to engage with the capability that you're offering. Think about how you use software in your daily life. Do you read a training manual before you begin using it? In most instances, that's not the case. You simply open up an app, launch a web service, or download some software and get to work. And maybe there's a quick tutorial, but it's very simple, it's straightforward, and it doesn't take a lot of time. You also go all the way through the process. So not just putting information in or not just looking information up, but what comes out on the other end and how is it used? Maybe how is data stored? Is it readily accessible? Is certain types of data more accessible than others? You have to understand what are the needs of the users to do that. Number 3, make it simple and intuitive. Goes back to the previous point. In your everyday life, you expect technology to be simple. You expect to be able to just use it. You should look at your software that you're developing for the government or for citizens on behalf of the government to be the same experience that you have in your everyday life. And it's simple, but the real part that I like to key in on is intuitive. And when you're doing user-centered design, you'll actually watch how users use it, and you even watch their eyes. Do their eyes naturally go to the place that they're intended to find the part or find the capability that they're looking for? That's how you understand if your software is intuitive and able to be used by all kinds of users. Some of our users are elderly, some of them are disabled. Can they use it just as easily or easy enough where they can get their task done without feeling frustrated? Number 4, build the software using agile and iterative processes. This is near and dear to my heart, obviously. Building software agile and iterative takes from the learnings of lean capabilities or lean development or lean manufacturing that was implemented by Toyota many, many years ago and applies it to software development. And why it's so critical is because the best way to learn from your users is to get product in the hands of users. By doing it agile and iteratively, which is supported by FAR Part 39.1 modular contracting, which was in place long before the digital service or 18F even existed, has that in mind. It's the idea that you start quickly and you fail fast, meaning you understand where you've made your mistakes before it's too late to undo those mistakes. How many waterfall acquisitions, development processes have we seen where you don't find out there's a critical failure until you get all the way to the end of the contract or to IOC or FOC final testing areas to see where you have made a mistake? And maybe those mistakes are a security mistake. That means you can't even use the software. But if you build that into each cycle of agile and iterative development, you find out early on whether or not you're going to have those problems, and you build to solve those problems. Number 5, structure budgets and contracts to support delivery. I've always said, I don't need to tell you what kind of contract you need to use. I need to build a contract so you can do what you need to do. And that's really important to remember, especially as contracting officers. I used to be very hard pressed on a specific type of contract and a specific type of structure. And then one day I had an epiphany. Don't be so dogmatically agile that you're not agile. You need to structure for success. And that means building a contract that allows your customer, your program office, your requirements office, and your customer's customer, the user, to be able to interchange and exchange ideas and make changes on the fly. This gets back to the concept of the iron triangle. The iron triangle in traditional contracting talks about scope, period of performance, and cost. And those are the things that only the contracting officer can change. And that still holds true. But within those 3 corners is what I call non-contractual requirements or technical requirements. Those requirements should be fluid and allowed to respond to the iterative process, the learning process of developing and delivering software. And number 6, for this episode, the last one we're going to cover is assign one leader, assign one person who is responsible for making technical decisions. Now, in government contracting or government requirements, we tend to think that leaders have to be very, very senior. But in agile and iterative development, you actually want someone who is going to be tied into the delivery process. We call this person the product owner. And a product owner isn't necessarily someone who was the program manager the day before and wakes up the next morning as the product owner. Product owner is a very specific skill set that they have to understand what it means. The program manager will handle the responsibilities of resourcing and the overarching reporting up the chain and down the chain potentially. And that is still existing and very important, but the product owner is responsible for making day-to-day technical requirement determinations. That's the prioritization of the backlog, the racking and stacking of needs. All of the needs of all users can go into the backlog, but then you have to look at that backlog in terms of must-haves, should-haves, and could-haves. But even though something might be in a should have or could have column, it might be such a light lift that you prioritize it higher up on the list because it fits in within something that you must have and you're able to get it done within the confines of a sprint iteration, because sprint iterations are time boxed. And so you can only fit so much within that period. We call that capacity. And that capacity has to be aligned. So sometimes user stories, which the backlog is turned into, might have more requirement or more capacity associated with it than can be done within an individual sprint. As you break those down, you still might have some leftover capacity. That capacity can be used to work off some of those should haves and could haves and still meet the ultimate delivery intent of the sprint iteration. So there you have it. That's the first 6 plays of the Digital Service Playbook. Check out next week for the following 7 plays. We'll walk through those as well. I hope you found this useful, a nice check back into the past to find out where we came from. For those of you who are new to this endeavor, you get a little bit of a basis of where this all comes from. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe. If you want to support and become a Patreon, you can contribute to improve the content and quality of these videos. But most importantly, you keep watching and I'll keep making the videos. Until next week, cheers.